Joe, whenever you're ready.
Time.
I started, so I got to Maryland just like, I guess it was like almost like a month ago, I guess. And so I started with this here when I got here, just about. And it's just the Grim Reaper here. And I went to the museum when I got here, and I kind of saw something that looked like this tree in like one of the paintings. And I liked it, so I put it in there. This is acrylic, and I was just, it's sort of like a perspective thing, and there's sort of, I like the trees of heaven and these big lily pad things here, so I was noticing those and I put them in. And then for this one, it's like a cow, and I read about this figure in a book, because apparently they used to think that there was like people who looked like this somewhere in the world, which is fun. And then and also this little cow creature, I saw it in like a dream. And then this is from, I was reading Dante's Inferno, and I was reading it a little while ago, but then I sort of picked it back up lately. And so, I mean, this is just the same exact thing as these modality-wise. So basically, I'll start with a graphite drawing. And in these cases, I'll have like a horizon line and stuff, and I'll sort of draft it all out, not too meticulously for these ones. And then I have this, you can see this one's not finished, and it's sort of got this underpainting thing, which I did, and so I go over that. And then, so there's some lizard people and stuff. And this is like a fiend. And this is sort of, now I started this, I started all those ones sort of before the classes began. That one I sort of started during orientation. And then those other two are sort of like before orientation when I got here. And so this one I was thinking about what Stephen's saying with sort of like copying and borrowing from masters or craftsmen from the past and stuff like that, and I'm trying to sort of build up a new method, and I'm just trying to, this is sort of like an experiment in the method. So basically I sort of like got this sky from I had a book, and I sort of ripped the sky from a book, ripped the texture on these like things from some book that Isaac gave me, and sort of maybe thought about the trees and sort of also in that way. But I'm thinking I don't know the difference between stealing and borrowing, and I kind of want to know what that difference is and stuff. So, and I was also trying to loosen up. I didn't do like an underpainting on this one, whereas on those ones it's kind of like I did black and white first, and then so. I just sort of like did like it was like very sketchy on this one, the first thing. And then this one, I was thinking about how to sort of like Stephen said, like pick a couple of colors. I think he said it in the last lecture too. It's like pick a couple of colors and just like sort of let the image form out of itself and stuff. But I don't know exactly. I was just sort of, it's an experiment. So, yeah.
This is a
question that I always like to ask, which is, and maybe it's not something that you can answer exactly, but what do you think is, like, what's you know, the way I've been formulating it is what's at stake for you in it, and like maybe the way of thinking about what is a stake is something that, like, what are you really like trying to nail down, like what are you tethered to, and like what is at risk of being lost, like lives were at stake. What are you sort of like trying to preserve / trying to pin down?
Well, I'm trying to sort of, well, since I'm here at this in a scholarly environment, I'm thinking I kind of want to just let go of everything that I've ever like thought before, but obviously I don't know if I can do that.
That doesn't seem like a stake.
But that's not a stake, you know.
Yeah, but what do you think? Well, then I'll say what has been at stake then.
Time, money.
Time, money. Say more about that.
Well, I mean, when it was a while ago, I mean that was what was at stake a while ago. That's not really at stake anymore. For me, personally.
But like even when you're alone making these, what you're thinking in your mind is time and money?
Well, no, not necessarily. I mean, I like literature. I guess I don't really, the stakes, I don't really understand the question.
I mean, these are just like so full of imagination. Like I imagine that when you're painting these, you're really enjoying the process of letting a world open up inside yourself where things can happen. And
yeah, that's always been like a part of the equation.
You say all these are happening in the same world?
Well, maybe the three on the left are kind of happening in the same world, but maybe like a world of dreams or like a sort of spirit world or something, but not. But it's not necessary. It's more. I guess it's more just whatever I feel like doing.
I enjoy the range of color tone that you use in each individual piece. So each figure is so much attention to the specific colors. It makes them very dynamic and makes them stand out up against each other.
I think what's like kind of an enigma for me is that these pieces are so specifically articulated and so tightened down, but then they're kind of about like something that's not super tight. I think that's why I'm interested, because it's such a specific question to something that almost has an open.
That's what the playfulness about it.
Huh?
Like playfulness about it.
Well, yeah, it's playful, but it's like, it's imaginative. It's not. It's fictional in some sense. I just think that's an interesting relationship.
try to like, especially when you say something, which is like when you describe it as you said that there's something that's pinned down and then something that's not pinned down. This is just like I always feel like it's exactly those moments where if you try then a little bit to say what you mean by what that something is, that's usually the juiciest part.
Yeah, I meant like formally, like they're so tightened down, but then conceptually, it's so open-ended, I guess.
So say more about what you mean by formally and what you mean by conceptual.
Like formally, like it's so descriptive, the brush strokes are so small, and it's like illustrative, like there's a narrative there. But then conceptually, we're not sure why he's tying certain motifs together and where they come from and what the significance is of taking the sky from one painter.
I know we're not sure, but it's okay for us to guess. It's okay for us to read these paintings.
I don't know. When I look at paintings, I tend to like squint at them. When I is looking at these four, I guess I'm not sure about what role painting is playing in terms of my experience of these works as a viewer. It seems like the sort of thing coming to the fore is this sort of kind of like creative like virtuosity, like literally just this sort of kind of world building. But the painting itself, it seems like these could be like a digital creation, and I could kind of get the same sort of narrative content out of them, if that makes sense. So then I'm sort of impressed but also confused by why I'm experiencing this as a painting instead of as something else. But what I don't, where that sort of like doesn't happen for me, of course, is this last one where it's interesting to me that I see the same kind of like continuity, like there's sort of compositional elements that are similar, there's sorts of like material processes that I see repeated throughout all of them, but this one can only exist as a painting. It's like I'm not looking at something that is sort of like illustrated by paint.
Sorry, I just have the need to say I would say the opposite. That these ones I understand the painting in them, and this one feels random to me. I mean, I understand this is a quote-unquote material exploration, but something about the duration, I would say, the length of time that it took you to maybe start the painting to the end of the painting, I think that feels so, that's part of what I find compelling in the work, is like actually thinking of the each figure not as just any random figure, but they seem to have very distinctive, I would say that every single inch of every single bit of this painting has distinctive qualities. Like that it's a very sort of even, that you've paid attention to every single part of the canvas, and I find that to be, it keeps me in, I find myself wanting to look at these paintings for a long time.
There's a habit that I've noticed among a lot of you. I'm just going to call this out as sort of a global observation. You have this tendency to start talking about your work through chronology. You say, oh, I started this painting at such and such a point, and then I moved on to this other thing, and I did this other thing. There are more compelling ways to talk about your work. The first question that Fox posed, which was what's at stake, is exactly the question I wanted to ask you. Like, what is your ambition with this painting? Like, what do you want it to do or be in the world? Like, you can start talking from there. Like, I started this painting thinking that I blah, 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 blah. Whatever it is. Like, whatever it is that you say is going to be valid. Whatever you say, I'm going to be on board with, most likely. But if you start from the place of real, this is how I engage with the material, you give the rest of the people in the room a chance to do the same. You give us less of a chance when you start off with, well, I started this painting when I was whatever. These paintings are very painterly. I know we can unpack that term, but like there's a lot going on with how you're using the medium. And yeah, I can see an investment in that, but I still don't know what the paintings want to do. Like there's clearly an aspect of them that could be narrative, great. But is there a particular reason they need to be narrative, or that is there some sort of particular narrative that they're invested in? I mean, when I saw the middle painting, I thought of Hieronymus Bosch, so it made sense to me that you were thinking about Dante's Inferno. Great, but okay, where does that go? I mean, if you want to give us a horrorscape, that's fine, but I would imagine that you would want to give us a sort of hellscape in order to do X, Y, and Z. And I don't think that you necessarily know, you need to know right now what the answer to that question is, but you need to be thinking about that. At some point, it would be good for you to know. why you want to do that. And this is something I may end up saying again, because it's something I find I've said before a lot, not here, but I've said around and for painters. You don't necessarily need to know why, or rather, you don't necessarily need to tell us why you're making a painting when you're talking about the painting, but you have to know why. Like, you have to be able to determine where it's coming from and what you want the painting to do. Sometimes, and this sounds like I'm contradicting myself because I did say at the start of this soliloquy that it'd be nice if you did say. The thing is, for now, at this point in your sort of working practice, it's useful to practice saying, this is what I'm doing. At some point, when you're a more mature painter, sometimes you're not ever going to say it out loud. Sometimes you're going to hide that. Sometimes that information is just for you. And in some ways, it's going to make the painting stronger because you know and nobody else does. But for now, it's really helpful to practice saying, this is what I'm about. This is what I'm trying to do. Does that make sense?
I'll just add, I'll say that for myself, that's a really hard thing to do. It's really hard to sort of say what you're doing. It's just really hard. Of course, it's a meaningful challenge. I will say that one of the things that I find that the painting, there's like things like where you talk about the clouds that you stole that, because I was immediately like, that part of the painting is really good, you know? And then when you said like you stole that, I was like, okay, you know? But I think that's totally, like, I don't care at all that you stole it. They're just clouds, you know? Like I mean, I don't know. Then the parts that I, like in the painting, that I think, like, and I think that maybe I'm being influenced by this, which is I say like, okay, the color in this painting is just so bad. This is like horrible. Like those colors make me hurt all over. Like it's just like the red, yellow, blue, white, like there's so little nuance. They're just straight out of the tube. It feels like a very insensitive painting, whereas like these have, like you sort of intuitively are sort of thinking about orange and blue and complementary colors and the way things like, I love the way the sort of dark blue of the water crashes up on this like kind of bright yellow coast, and then the way that the brown of the boats and that there's little blue figures inside of them. Like there's interesting color relationships that sort of help me. The like light green of the grass there relative to the dark green of the, anyway, there's I find some more subtle color relationships, but I think that they could become even more rich. Like I question why all of the little waves all need to have only white caps. Like, can you somehow make me understand that the light that I'm seeing inside of the clouds, like, because those clouds are not just like blue and white, right? Like you have like a color which actually I would say is unnameable, that sort of deep purplish mauve brown color underneath the clouds gives me a kind of sense that I'm watching something moving rather than just reading it as waves. And so when the color sort of operates in a singular way rather than in a sort of transforming way, then I mean, I think that to some extent you need that, because I think that I'm meant to read these paintings. And then that would be another thing where maybe I just don't know yet. Like, I love that you're thinking about Dante's Inferno. That's amazing, because that's, you know, that's great narrative, you know, like, you should steal from there too. I don't think that you always have to invent all of the narratives. That's impossible. That's like too much to do. But I wonder if you can't help me in the paintings to understand something about Dante's Inferno. Like, what are you trying to tell me about that? And that's the risk that you would take. That's the sort of like, being like, I read this, wow, I found this part really fascinating, and so I'm gonna now show my viewer what I learned from Dante's Inferno. right? Like how can you sort of risk making some kind of statement? And sorry, I know I'm going on. The last thing I'll say is, I mean, this is relative to the conversation of success, which is, I think maybe something that's difficult and maybe not talked enough about is style. How does style convey meaning? What do I know or think about this work relative to what I think about maybe a subculture who consumes this style of work? And so then that makes me think of David Wojnarowicz's paintings.
I'd like to piggyback on what you said. There's a level of, I come at these, like, my relationship to these is like, you have this dream, and the way I understand your process is like, there's this wonderful idea in the beginning, and then you start to build off of that, and then you're like, okay, now I need to assign a lot of other things to this as like this sort of narrative, and then you arrive at this finished form, and I think what you're saying is that you need to think more about like what is happening in between the idea and then the final, the production value of all these. You've got a lot of them. Like maybe spend a little bit more time in between, and like what is like maybe there's you're playing more with texturality, or there's a lot of things you can go forward with. But I think spending that time in the middle is maybe where you might need to go, because I feel like there's a lack of the way we're receiving these is like, what am I kind of looking at? But like, you're giving us a lot. We're also having to question most of what we're seeing.
I think the four works on the left side of the one on the right, to me seems they have a lot of ownership of what ugly and beauty is, because again there's this very conventional idea of perspective that is in the composition that is compelling. You need to engage with the painting in a way like, my brain is functioning in space, it's spatial. But again, then there's these monsters, basically, that are present, and also second and third painting on the left has these vibrant textures that almost feel organic, like they're also living things. And I think that there's a tension, for me, that's there, that makes me want to go into the painting, but don't want to be there. But again, like that's what's making it interesting for me. So I think that's why the right painting, on the very right, is that tension is lost for me, and I think that's what is. I'm not saying it's like what is something is better or not, but I think that's why, for me, that's the differentiation I associate. So maybe thinking about that ugly and beauty might help.
Looking at the commonality of your paintings, also I've seen many of your other paintings, and I found a couple of themes that you keep going back to. One is aggressive, violence, punishment, and a
Can you
lot
speak
of
a little louder?
Okay, so some themes I found he was constantly going back to
talking relative to that news article about the Rolling Stones guy. Making those
Yeah.
racist
Yeah,
comments.
yeah.
Yeah. I was thinking like, cause it's like he only wants to interview other white guys.
Yeah.
And I was like thinking, like, and he basically thinks that everybody else is like kind of dumb.
Basically.
Yeah.
Was it women?
Like, and I'm just like, in today's age that he would like say something like that, it's
Out
just like outrageous, you know? But I was like, but I was like thinking like if he had said like, I'm interviewing other white guys because I'm a white guy and I identify with them, would that have been an okay answer?
Probably.
Like at least it would have been self-aware,
Right.
you know? I don't know. And maybe that's true, like I get it. Like he's like, I don't really like get Joni Mitchell, I don't know where she's coming from, I'm not a white woman, right? Or I don't really get Stevie Wonder,
Right.
I'm not a black man. Okay,
Right.
you know, but he's just like he condescends to them, which is like then like poo-poo, you're out. Like so, but then I'm like just looking at these and I'm wondering like if they could be like if we could say that they're like about white masculinity, like could that be something that they're about? Which we never went over to your question of like
Yeah.
pictures of whiteness
Right.
from last
Yeah,
class.
yeah. Yeah, I don't read these that way, although that's perfectly valid.
Yeah.
What I read is, and here I know I'm projecting, but that's okay, because I'm talking about these objects, and it's the object system I have a primary relationship to. They feel a bit, and I think, tell me your name,
Jillian?
Jillian?
Yeah.
I think Jillian was kind of getting at this, where she was saying that they weren't essentially, I'm going to paraphrase you badly, that they weren't painterly enough for her. Like, I think she was getting at that they kind of feel like they're illustrative of a story or a thing. A thing is really, that's not good, sorry. They're illustrative of a story or a set of events. And the painting doesn't come in enough to make it so that the story or event is less important than the painting. And I think Jillian wants painting. And I'm okay with like it being a story and you're illustrating something. I'm just kind of fascinated by this set of stories, and I actually think that you could go further. It can be even more imaginative. And somebody had said something about, oh, you had said it was a fairly conventional composition. Like the point of view is fairly conventional. I think that's spot on. I think like that's sort of like almost like, again, I'm going to get this partially wrong, 3/4 shot kind of filmic sort of perspective. It's fairly conventional. You can move the camera to be wherever you want it to be. But I'm really fascinated that you've made these worlds as fully realized as you've made them, and I think you can actually go much further into them. And they can be even more sort of imaginative and inventive environments.
I just want to say quickly that I don't think those two things are at odds, the painting investigation and the narrative investigation at all. I think the painting aspect of it can support the narrative aspect of it. And that's what in great narrative paintings is what's happening, right? But I completely agree that the world is interesting. It just depends on how you express that world, you know? And I also want to double down on this point about the point of view of the camera, you know? And that can be such a powerful tool. And such a way that you feel, you know, that there's a certain kind of assumed objectivity in this viewpoint. But the minute that it's the role it plays in films, right? It's like when you're going to be, that's a location shot. And when then the camera moves somewhere else and you find out something else about that place. And that's just something you take into account.
That's time. I just want to say two names of two books really quick, which is Lipstick Traces by Grill Marcus, which is like the history of punk, and Dick Hebdige, Subculture, the Meaning of Style, and then say one painter's name, which is Monica Baer, who uses very detailed symbolic language to do something kind of it's very involved in symbolism.
I got a book for you too, with photos on that.
Okay.
It's called Brush Stroke and Emergence. It's a fairly recent book. The guy's name is Herbert. I can't remember his first name. But it actually talks very specifically about the relationship of the material character of paint to the depicted subject. So I think you find that, especially with your philosophy background, I think you find it particularly interesting. That is all.